Regular viewers who know I generally put an update about the cattle at the end of the video, I have put an update about Daisy later on in the film. It's been a significant day with the local election results almost all in, and many turquoise blue seats in the North and Midlands in particular, and in Kent seems to have been taken over. Here where I am in Wiltshire, we have moved to no overall control from the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems have got the largest party, same in Gloucestershire. But Labour have been given a huge drubbing, and the Conservatives have been given an enormous drubbing. And no doubt we will now be having to endure Nigel Farage even more than we have already, and he's going to keep on saying that he's going to win the next election. Rumours are swirling that Keir Starmer has had enough and might stand down. I wouldn't be sorry to hear that. I think that this is so significant that something major needs to be turned around. They have made disastrous decisions since they took office, and really the only way they're going to regain any ground is by major change. And again, yesterday in the Commons, there was debate, questions about business and trade, and the Trade Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, was answerable to some questions about trade with Europe and trade with other countries, India and USA. And this whole riding both horses and this dishonesty around being able to do the two things, to get trade deals with India, which I hear is incoming this weekend, which means accepting lower standards of food, absolutely scotches any hope of improving the deal with Europe, despite the fact that this Labour Party accept that the EU is our largest and most important trading partner. Everything they seem to do and say makes no sense.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the utter unreliability and, frankly, economic illiteracy of President Trump, and given the fact that the EU is by far our largest trading partner, it is clear that the best interests of the UK are served by the closest possible deal with the EU. Does the Minister agree with me specifically that that should include youth mobility and improved energy and climate cooperation? And specifically, will he work with his colleagues to ensure that we ease burdens for British business by linking the UK and EU emissions trading schemes and by aligning on chemicals regulation in order to boost British productivity and prosperity?
I think that was a few questions, but we seem to have time for it today, so I welcome all of them on these exchanges. I would of course recognise exactly what she has said. The figures speak for themselves about the importance of the EU as a principal trading partner for this country. I would disagree with her with the sense we have to choose between the US and the EU or any other markets. I believe the UK can be well positioned for all of those markets. And I know there will be strong political views in this place about political leaders in a range of countries. I would just say to you, when it comes to the United States, there are potentially thousands of jobs at stake, and that is why we are pursuing a trade and economic prosperity deal with the US, and I think we can't get away from that. On the specific questions relating to the EU, I mean, it takes both parties for a successful negotiation. I do want to see greater cooperation. I wouldn't talk about the specifics of any part of those negotiations, but I wouldn't want, for instance, the kind of barriers she's identified to be in place. I would want the UK to have the best and most frictionless trade possible with the EU, consistent with our aspirations and obligations with the rest of the world. But she's made her point very well, and I recognise it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's good to hear that the trade negotiations that began when we were in government are progressing well with India. And there must surely now be an opportunity to reopen talks with Canada so that they can buy more wonderful cheese from the UK. But with the tariff clock ticking, I'm sure that the Secretary of State recognises that the US deal is surely the most urgent, with the many UK jobs at risk. And yet we heard recently from the Chancellor when she was in the States that her bigger priority is discussions with the EU, where we already have zero tariffs and zero quotas. So does the Secretary of State share the Chancellor's priorities, or does he think that the US is more urgent?
Well, I thank her for her earlier comments. She's right, we, as she knows, wanted the previous government to do the India FTA. We're willing to support them fully in order to do that. They weren't able to get that across the line with Canada. The issues, particularly around agriculture, are very similar to the US, and that can be more of a challenging negotiation. The entirety, however, of this government has been clear. This is not about seeking to pick between one market or another. Both are absolutely fundamental. The Chancellor's comments specifically relate to the fact that it's simply true that our UK-EU trade is a much greater quantum than UK-US trade. But equally, in all of these negotiations, we've got to not just focus on what can be done quickly, but what can be done right, what can be done in the national interest. There's no point doing an agreement that doesn't deliver on our objectives, no matter who that agreement was with. And we would welcome any support from the other side for the work we're trying to do. I do believe it's easier politically for this government to do some of the trade agreements that are available to the UK, but maybe we're not politically available to the Conservative Party. We'll continue to do that work, and we welcome all support across the House for it.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, I asked the Prime Minister whether Parliament will get a final vote on any trade deal negotiated with the United States. The Prime Minister stated that it would go through the known process. This process does not include a vote for MPs on the ratification of any trade deals. Therefore, can the Minister please make it explicitly clear, with a yes or no answer, will MPs get a final vote on the deal with the United States? Because the PM's answer yesterday implied that we wouldn't.
The answer, as he knows, is no, we're not seeking to change the process of the ratification of any treaty under this government, but he knows the process and how it works. The Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010 sets out that process. It allows MPs to scrutinise any treaty when it is agreed by the country and presented to the House. And then, of course, the implementation of any aspect of any treaty still has to come to Parliament. It's not the case that any agreement on any kind of international treaty can supersede what we agree in this place. So all members of Parliament will get their same rights, their same privileges, quite rightly, as part of that process. But no, we're not proposing changes to the process by which we agree treaties with other countries. Mr. Speaker, I regularly engage with my Cabinet colleagues on a wide range of issues, but particularly on the UK's ongoing trade discussions with partner countries, given the cross-cutting nature of those matters. And the Secretary of State for DEFRA is a key partner in that process, including with the US. We have, as colleagues know, had constructive discussions with the US on an economic deal, and we remain committed to those talks. But we have made clear we will only ever sign trade agreements which align with the UK's national interests, and our manifesto was also clear we will always uphold our high food standards.
Mr Carmichael.
The Secretary of State for that answer. The Secretary of State in DEFRA recently appointed Baroness Batters to lead a profitability review in farming. He, within DEFRA, has actually set up a farm profitability unit. These are very welcome and necessary steps. But, Mr Speaker, it is not entirely unknown for the efforts of one government department to undermine the efforts of another. So before he signs any trade deal with America, will he check in with DEFRA and run the rule over what they are doing in relation to farm incomes and ensure that he does not undermine the efforts of that department?
I think we'll all struggle to believe that different government departments could not at times be coordinated with each other. I can't recognise that at all. But I absolutely agree with what he has said. I think the moves to look at the business models around farming and the profitability are a very welcome thing, and I think colleagues on all sides would support that. But I can tell him specifically on matters of trade, DEFRA is very closely involved, Secretary of State is very closely involved with those conversations. I do also think there is the prospect, and I know perhaps in the past the community hasn't always felt this. For some of the trade negotiations that we are ongoing and progressing, there are real export opportunities for UK agriculture. The quality, the premium, the brand associated with that is a market that is growing around the world. And part of our discussions in a whole range of different trade negotiations are about making sure there are more opportunities in future. But I can promise him, in terms of the overall efforts of government in this sector, that is coordinated and is ongoing.
With the Conservatives, the Reform Party and the Labour Party all competing for right-wing votes, pro-Brexit votes. It largely means that those to the left of centre and to the right, slightly to the right of centre, have no representation. Pro-Europeans who want to rejoin the European Union, or at least get in as close to possible, to get rid of these trade barriers, to get our freedom of movement back, to feel secure and safe, have really nobody to represent us, because even the Lib Dems are not abundantly clear on this. They're only committing to trying to get back in the customs union, which is better than nothing, but it's not really enough. And we are now seeing Nigel Farage raising up more and more, despite the fact that it is him who's created the mess. Mostly people are voting for him on populist measures, mostly around immigration, and something really needs to happen. The number of parties is ahead of the game. Our first past the post system is broken, and the government in power has a huge majority, and they can push through proportional representation. If we'd had PR in situ now, the results today would not be what they are. And it is important that we secure our country and save it from being hijacked by an extreme agenda, which would eventually culminate in taking us out of the ECHR, and that would cause huge problems for the trade deal with the EU, and it would cause huge problems for the Good Friday Agreement. So these are very dangerous times, and serious measures need to be taken. And I hope that people in the Labour Party now actually realise that the leadership was wrong to not listen, and that change really does have to happen. I'm really sorry to report that our favourite head cow, Daisy, is no longer with us. She lost her struggle, she wasn't well, and last weekend we had to say goodbye to her. So we're feeling very sad about this. But the new heifers are doing well. They're out with Fred, who's actually called Ethelred, and here they are having fun and enjoying the lovely weather. So new life continues. Tufty, the Hereford you can see here, is just as friendly as Daisy, so hopefully she can fill the void.